Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking the life of a man who absolutely defied the odds, rising from extreme frontier poverty to guide the United States through its ultimate moral, constitutional, and political crisis, the American Civil War.
Seriously, how exactly does a kid with barely any formal education manage to hold a fracturing country together and completely dismantle the institution of slavery? Well, let's dive right in and trace this incredibly dramatic journey from a one-room log cabin all the way to the ultimate sacrifice for freedom.
Section 1. The Frontier Boy. Let's take a look at his early life.
Born to uneducated farmers back in Kentucky in 1809, life on the frontier was, well, it was unforgiving. There was no wealth, no political pedigree, just a tiny single-room cabin in the middle of the wilderness. When Lincoln was just 7 years old, land disputes forced the family to pack up and move to southern Indiana. And then, tragedy struck. At age 9, he lost his mother to a devastating, highly fatal disease known as milk sickness. But this profound loss was eventually followed by a massive turning point, the arrival of a loving stepmother, Sarah Bush Johnston, and she would completely change the trajectory of his life.
Now, I want you to think about the number 1. Just 1. Because that represents the total number of years of formal schooling Abraham Lincoln had in his entire life. Less than a single year actually sitting in a classroom.
So you're probably wondering, how on earth did he become so brilliantly articulate? The short answer? He did it himself. Strongly encouraged by his stepmother, he became fiercely self-taught. He voraciously read absolutely everything he could get his hands on. After exhausting, backbreaking days working the fields, he'd stay up studying by the dim light of the fireplace, reading the Bible, Aesop's Fables, and Robinson Crusoe. He literally built a world-renowned intellect from scratch.
Fast forward to 1830 and his family relocates to Illinois. Lincoln took on a whole variety of odd jobs just to survive, working as a shopkeeper, a postmaster, and even a surveyor in New Salem. But it was a trip working as a flatboat pilot down the Mississippi River to New Orleans that changed him forever. Down there, he witnessed the sheer, brutal reality of chattel slavery firsthand. It was an experience that deeply unsettled him and planted the seeds for his future political battles.
Section 2. Rise to prominence. Let's get into his politics and law career.
His ascent was incredibly rapid. At just 25 years old, he was elected to the Illinois State House as a Whig Party member. By 1836, he passed the bar exam. And get this, he impressively taught himself law simply by reading William Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England. A decade later, he served a single term in the U.S. House of Representatives, where he boldly opposed the Mexican-American War and firmly spoke out against the expansion of slavery. Back in Springfield, he built a stellar reputation as a country lawyer, earning the famous moniker you've definitely heard, Honest Abe. He wasn't just book smart, he was exceptionally trustworthy, and that was a vital character trait that really set the stage for his national appeal. Now, history is full of fascinating contradictions, and Lincoln's life is no exception. In 1842, he married Mary Todd, a woman from a wealthy, slave-holding family in Kentucky. Yet, despite marrying into a family with deep Southern ties, Lincoln's anti-slavery stances only hardened over time. This all culminated in the legendary 1858 debates against Stephen A. Douglas, where Lincoln fiercely attacked the moral wrong of slavery while running for the U.S. Senate. Actually, he lost that Senate race to Douglas, but those spectacular debates, they were a real game changer, catapulting him to national prominence. Running as the candidate for the newly formed anti-slavery Republican Party, Lincoln won the presidency in November 1860. And the truly shocking part here, he pulled it off without winning a single Southern state. The nation was immediately fractured. Section 3. The Civil War. His presidency. Before Lincoln even took the oath of office in March 1861, 7 Southern states had already seceded from the Union, terrified of his anti-slavery stance. They were soon joined by 4 more to form the Confederacy. His presidency instantly became a crucible of fire. From the very first shots at Fort Sumter in 1861 to the strategic brilliance of the Emancipation Proclamation in January 1863, which totally transformed the war into a direct crusade against slavery, later that year came the Gettysburg Address. In 1864, his crucial re-election gave him the absolute mandate to finish the fight, leading right into his successful push for the 13th Amendment in January 1865, abolishing slavery nationwide. And then, finally,
On April 9, 1865, 4 years of brutal, bloody conflict came to an end. Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. It was a massive, hard-fought triumph for the embattled president.
Section 4. A Shattered Nation Healed. Let's look at Lincoln's legacies.
So, what's the big takeaway here? There are 3 core legacies you should truly remember from his presidency. First, the abolition of slavery, which liberated nearly 4 million people from bondage. Second, the preservation of the Union. He absolutely refused to compromise on secession, ensuring the U.S. remained a single, indivisible nation. And third, completely redefining the American ideal.
He accomplished that redefinition perfectly in the Gettysburg Address. I mean, in a brief, 272-word speech, he re-anchored the entire nation's purpose right back to the Declaration of Independence. He promised that a government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth, demanding that all men are truly created equal.
Section 5. The Final Tragedy. The Assassination.
Just 5 days, literally 5 days, after General Lee's surrender, the joyous national celebration violently and suddenly whiplashed into tragedy. A sinister plot was brewing. John Wilkes Booth, a well-known actor and passionate Confederate spy, formed a conspiracy with a few accomplices. They weren't just targeting the president. They aimed to assassinate Lincoln, the vice president, and the Secretary of State all at once. The goal was desperate and chilling: decapitate the government and plunge the Union right back into total chaos.
This shocking, true crime sequence unfolded on Good Friday. While Lincoln and his wife were watching the comedy play Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater, Booth slipped into the unguarded presidential box. Within a single minute, the fatal shot was fired, and Booth had escaped. By the very next morning, the president was gone.
The actual details of that night are incredibly harrowing. Waiting for a loud burst of laughter from the audience to mask the sound, Booth shot President Lincoln in the back of the head at point-blank range with a .44 caliber Derringer. He then slashed Major Henry Rathbone with a knife, leaped down to the stage, actually breaking his leg in the fall, and shouted "Sic semper tyrannis," which means "thus always to tyrants," before fleeing on horseback into the night. Soldiers quickly, frantically carried the unconscious president across the street to the Peterson house. But despite doctors working through the night, the bullet wound was fatal. At 7:22 a.m. on April 15, 1865, the frontier boy who saved the nation passed away at the age of 56. His body was then carried on a deeply mournful 1,600-mile funeral train journey back to Springfield, with millions of people lining the tracks to weep for their fallen leader. Standing right there at Lincoln's deathbed, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton uttered these immortal words: "Now he belongs to the ages." And honestly, he hit the nail on the head. It perfectly captured the immediate transition of Abraham Lincoln from a mortal man to an enduring American myth.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today. How does Lincoln's profound redefinition of democracy and equality continue to shape our world right now? His words definitely still echo loudly today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious and keep exploring the incredible history that built our modern world.